And every registered guest will receive a copy of the recording at the conclusion of today's session. We ask that you mute yourself during Ms. Foster's presentation, but utilize the chat to engage with us to keep the conversation going. There will be a portion of the presentation where you can unmute yourself and ask Ms. Foster a question. But let's get into it. Makiba Foster is the manager of the African-American Research Library and Cultural Center for Broward County Libraries. In 2019, she took helm with the vision to bring the African-American Research Library and Cultural Center to the next level with regard to raising its national profile and reimagining its services, programs, and community outreach. Within her first year, she quickly implemented new and engaging series like the Cultural Conversations, as well as secured critical funding from local and national granting agencies to support collections, new programs, and innovative services. Her most recent projects include creating a social justice artist residency and the historic web archiving project, Archiving the Black Web. Makiba's past roles include successful tenures as the Assistant Chief Librarian at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture with the New York Public Library, and the Curator of Oral History for Libraries at Washington University in St. Louis. Throughout her career, Makiba has increasingly invested her energies in helping libraries reimagine their services to better serve and positively impact the community. Holding master's degrees in library and information science and American culture studies from the University of Alabama, her most recent research appears in the Library Trends Journal, special issue, Race and Ethnicity in Library and Information Science and Update, where she discusses using library collections to promote historical literacy on the Black experience, specifically highlighting the Negro Motorist Green Book. We need to all check that out. In 2021, Makiba was recognized by the Library Journal as a 2021 mover and shaker in the area of digital developer. In addition, she is the recipient of the 2020 Florida Library Association Award for Outstanding Scholarly Contribution and was selected by Legacy South Florida Magazine as a member of the 50 most influential and powerful Black professionals of 2020. We are in for a treat today, so let's please all welcome Ms. Makiba Foster.
I will unmute myself. You know, as many times as I've done Zoom presentations, you still feel a little rusty. So thank you all for the opportunity to share with you all today. Can you see my screen? All right. So I want to first off start by giving thanks for this opportunity to be able to speak to you about everyday people celebrating Black history every day with the African-American Research Library and Cultural Center. And so it's really, I'm very humbled and also very proud to have been asked to be a Baker presenter, because now I am joining the ranks of such esteemed colleagues who've done past lectures. So thank you, Dr. Cook, for thinking enough of my work to ask me to be a part of this lecture series and for this wonderful opportunity. I'd also like to acknowledge, since this is Black History Month, this is the work that I do, that I love, that I want to acknowledge the people who came before me that imagined not only a world, but a profession that was better than what they inherited. So they worked towards that, to leave something behind for me that would encourage me and for me to be able to pick up in that legacy. And so I'm very thankful for them, and whose shoulders I stand on, and I work within that lineage. And so today is why I want to share with you my work around everyday people and encourage you to think about how to create community and collaboration, whether you're with a public library or whether you're with an academic library. We all are everyday people and who happen to sometimes do extraordinary things. You'll get a glimpse in a few minutes of why I have picked up on that language of extraordinary things, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. But I believe that this is within my duty to carry on this kind of work to help document and collect and preserve and also disseminate, make accessible Black history and culture. So one of my goals, as Sierra mentioned, in terms of raising the profile of the African American Research Library and Cultural Center, is that I'm always trying to share and help people learn more about our institution within our community. And so this is a fireside chat, but you might want to call it a show and tell. So since you are you chose to be here, you're going to learn more about Artic. So thank you so much for this opportunity for me to share a bit more about the African American Research Library and Cultural Center, which I will transition to saying Artic, because saying the African American Research Library and Cultural Center over and over again is a mouthful. So if you hear me say Artic, that's what I'm talking about, is our acronyms that we've changed into a word. So, can I advance? Not sure why this is not advancing. Come on. All right, thanks. Artic is a 60,000 square foot library, archive, and cultural center, and it is located in a very special place. It is located within the Sistrunk community. The Sistrunk community is the oldest African-American community, Black community within Broward County. It is named for the first physician who settled here, Black physician settled here in Broward County. And since that time, it has been known as the Sistrunk community, named after Dr. James Sistrunk. And so our libraries opened in 2002 with the mission to collect and preserve, document, make accessible content about people from African-American, Caribbean descent, all folks that are a part of the African diaspora. And so in that work of carrying out and preserving this content and making it accessible, we create programs, outreach programs focused on community engagement, the arts and arts education, and access to numerous services and resources targeting both youth as well as adults. And so I'm really happy to say that a lot of this work is inspired by folks who are now ancestors, but folks who are still with us today. But we are working to uphold and be within the continuum of their legacy of Black leaders in the Broward County community who would not settle for second-class citizenship, and who also believe very strongly that Black history is American history. Our stories are unique and diverse, and there should be a space that allows for that story to be told. And so I know there are other areas in the country. I once worked at the Mecca, but there's also space for us to continue this work across the country in different spaces, because every region and location has its own flavor. So really encouraging you to think about how you document and preserve the history of your local Black communities. So one of the things I want to talk about is I want to highlight some important people within the Black community here in Broward County, that like there is a complete straight through line from how you get to the African American Research Library and Cultural Center, from them to present day. And so it is related to Black libraries, librarianship, activism, and all of those things culminate to present day with the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. So as I've mentioned, we are located in a historic Black community. And the first gentleman that you see, very distinguished with his sign, this is Reverend Ivory Mizel. And he was known as the sort of like a Renaissance man within the Black community, and the unofficial sort of chronicler of Black life within Broward County. And he used his business, his skills as a photographer to pretty much document the lives of Black Broward County through proms, graduations, birthdays. And as you can see in this image, he's telling folks to get their picturized season's greetings cards. So this sort of document community kind of collector, community archivist, photographer, thinking about his work, he learned that at the time, the city of Fort Lauderdale was not providing services to people, Black folks. And so at the time, he was serving as the manager of the Dixie Court projects. And what he decided to do was turn his small office into a lending library. And so this is around like 1948, where he solicits books and he turns his office in the projects into a library that Black folks could come and use and check out. And so from that, he is known as establishing the first library that allowed Black folks in the city to use those resources. But at that time, it was his own, grit and hustle to get content within his office to allow Black people to have this sort of lending experience. So when we think about literacy and things like that, we're still within this sort of time frame where at one point it wasn't legal for Black folks to even know how to read, but we're still, even in the 1940s, having access to information is still a struggle in some communities. So he took it upon himself to create access to information in his office. So what happens is within a year of him starting this lending library, the city of Fort Lauderdale takes notice and they allot one staff person to staff his office and officially opened it to the community as a library. And this staff person is the woman that you see featured in the middle, Miss Mary Lou Barner, who serves with the distinction of being the first Black librarian in Broward County. Now, as we transition over to the gentleman on the end, it would take more than 20 years for that office library to emerge into a actual library fully staffed to serve the African-American community. But instead of naming it for Reverend Mizel, it's named for his brother, Dr. Von D. Mizel, for a lot of important reasons. Dr. Von Mizel is the second African-American physician in Broward County, and he, along with Dr. James Sistrunk, founds the first African-American Black hospital. Of course, at that time, segregation, Black people couldn't go to whites' hospitals, so Dr. Sistrunk and Dr. Mizel founded Providence Hospital. But not only does he do that, Dr. Mizel also becomes and founds the first NAACP chapter here in Broward. And one of the things that's particularly important to his legacy is that he was instrumental, along with Eula Johnson, in terms of desegregating the beaches of Fort Lauderdale to allow access to Black residents. So Black residents paying taxes and all those things still did not have access to all of the recreation and beachfront that people take for granted today, but at one point, Black folks weren't allowed to go to those beaches. And so these are the folks, like I said, that are connected to how Arlit becomes today. And so just as a sort of another picture, these are the brothers together. Interestingly, they are taking a photo on the boardwalk at the beach. And then you see the historic marker for Dr. Mizel and all of his weighed-in protests to protest the segregation practices at Fort Lauderdale beaches. And so they held literal weigh-ins. People came to the beach and were intending to be arrested. So there's a lot of ways in terms of direct activism that has happened to liberate this country. So when I mentioned Miss Barner, I failed to mention, but I think it's very important. We were able to honor Miss Barner just last week for her contributions to Black librarianships and library with our kickoff to our 20th anniversary year. So Miss Barner is seen here seated with her two daughters. She is full of vim and vigor. She is 90 years young, And she is so full of life and so very proud. And we're so happy that we were able to give her her flowers and acknowledge her contributions to advancing information in the Broward County community. And so the other thing that's important is that Ms. Bronner is still an active member of the Friends of the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. And so these are some of the genesis of why and how the African American Research Library has come to be. So I'm going to tell you about our institution. So how do we get to Artic? So it's very important for these two people that show up on your screen, and that is Samuel F. Morrison and Evelyn F. Walters. And so in 1996, funds were already set aside to rebuild the Von D. Mizel library that I told you about that was built. This was always just a small branch library within the community. But at the time, we had a visionary leader of Broward County Libraries who believed that the story of Blackness within South Florida deserved a sort of institution, a research facility that could really support understanding and research of Blackness and how it shows up in our region. And so that person is Samuel F. Morrison. He, at the time, had visited places like the Schomburg Center and Auburn Avenue Research Center. And he also thought that if we're going to take money to rebuild a small branch library, how about we think about doing something a bit grander? And so his vision was to create what we have now, which is the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. But in terms of everyday people, it would take the work of him really rallying the community to get behind this project, because the county had only set aside funds to create a small branch, rebuild a small branch library. And the shortfall for that was over $7 million. And so this is where he enlists the help of Ellen Walters, who is a respected educator in the community, but also she is the Friends president of the Von D. Mizel Library. And so what they do is they really set out on convincing the community to support the library. And so what Ms. Walters was able to do was create a community fundraising committee. And under her dynamic leadership, she was able to secure and contribute over $700,000 for the construction of Artic from just regular everyday people. So this is why our library is so important to the community, because there was an investment. It didn't just pop up, but in a lot of ways, everything that that we are able to build is always hard fought and won. And so the community feels particularly invested in this place because they know that through their support and fundraising efforts, this place would not have been possible without them. And so I have the quote on here, Sam is known for, and it's sort of a model that we live by here, is that ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And this also, in a lot of ways, guides our collecting practices in a lot of ways, because we're not always seeking out like the superstars or the luminaries within Black culture, but there is something to be said about understanding the very people that we live our lives around and what they have done to make our world and our community better. And so, like I said, that and guide some of our collection practices and things like that when we document and decide what to preserve in our archive around Black history and culture locally. And so one of the things I should say is that in 1999, they broke ground. In October 1999, the ground was broken, and you see the image of from American Library. Sam is seated, and then they have some priests breaking ground. So in a lot of ways, we believe Artic is sacred, and that ancestors are with us, rallying us on to continue the work that we are doing for not just ourselves, but for future generations. And so on October 26th of 2002, which is why we're in our 20th anniversary year, the construction on Artic was completed, and we opened our doors to the public for the first time. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the structure of the African American Research Library. As I said, we are a library, we are an archive and a cultural center. One of the things that makes us just a little bit different from some of the other folks that we've modeled ourselves off of is that we have a circulating collection. And that circulating collection focuses primarily on content from the Black diaspora, the Black experience. And those collections include items for youth, and so children and young adults, as well as adult information services. So you get an image of those two areas at the top of this photo grid. And so the other important part is our archive. And so as a member of the Broward County Library System, we have the distinction of being a flagship library. We're not a branch, we are a flagship library, and we're one of two flagship libraries. The other flagship within the Broward County system is the main library, which also houses a special collection, historical collection, and archive. And so we have archive as a second flagship within the Broward County system. And that archive includes sort of the typical things that you would get in the archive. It includes rare books, manuscripts, artifacts, art, reference materials, all those things that we work to preserve and make accessible to the community as primary kind of content. Some of our prominent collections include the personal collection of Dorothy Porter Wesley. We have some pieces by Alex Haley, as well as Niara Sudarkasa, who is first rate in terms of anthropology and making connections from Africa to the Black experience here in the States, as well as our Esther Rolle collection. Esther Rolle was from Broward County, born and raised in Pompano, and we were fortunate enough that her family donated her collection to us, which includes awards and all kinds of memorabilia from her time as an actress in Hollywood and her time as a dancer in theater in New York and all of those other good things on Broadway. All right. And so I want to kind of focus on, so I've talked to you about the library part, I've talked to you about the archive. I want to share with you another part of Artic that makes us pretty unique, and that is our cultural center. So we're the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. And so the Cultural Center is made up of three distinct parts. There is our museum space. The image that you see on the screen in the middle is an exhibit that was put on last year. The museum space is 5,000 square feet, and we host a range of different kind of national exhibits, as well as we create space for local artists as well to be able to have a place that will show and exhibit their artwork in a way that gives them a sort of vetting and accessibility to the public. And so that is our museum space. The other space that is a part of our cultural center offering is our Harambe room. The Harambe room is the image on the end. And this is actually, this room is considered a piece of public art. If you ever get a chance to visit, it is quite magnificent. The acoustics in it feel like a call and response when you're in the room. And it is done by the artist Gary Moore. It is supported by the Broward County Cultural Division. So they maintain and upkeep this room as a piece of public art, but it is a story of Black Broward. And so there's a series of repeating panels that sort of give you a narrative of all of the mixture of what is Blackness within this South Florida region. And so you get images of the beach wade-ins, you get all of the flags representing the Caribbean nations and the people of the Black diaspora there. You get connections to the continent. You can see an image of Africa, the Sankofa bird. There's images of Dr. Sistrunk, as well as Ivory Mizel in this room. But it is a space in which the artist Gary Moore wanted people to be able to go into and reflect. And its themes, like I said, are related to civil rights movement and its leaders within Fort Lauderdale. And so finally, the other important component that makes up our cultural center is our theater space. And so our theater can host all kinds of productions, plays, musicals, you name it, TED Talks, we've done those. But the theater space has created an opportunity where we remove some of the barriers to the community in terms of being able to put on productions in a space that will allow them to give honor and professionalism to some of the things that they create. And so we're happy that that is something that we've been able to do for the community. Other organizations might be price people out because of, you know, the money that they're trying to make, but we have created this space where it has allowed people to see their creativity come to life on an actual stage and with an actual sort of in a professional theater setting. And so for that, we are thankful to be able to support that kind of creativity in the community. And so one of the things that I'm most proud of is our new exhibit that we did debut last Friday called Collectors Duet. Our archivists and exhibit folks at Artic did such a fabulous job of sharing the story of two women who are featured very prominently in our collection. And that is Dorothy Porter Wesley. Who knew that pieces of Dorothy Porter Wesley's collection would be here in South Florida, and also Vivian Hewitt. And so both of these women have made a mark on librarianship in ways that we all stand on their shoulders, making and hopefully carrying out their legacy even further. But Dorothy Porter Wesley lived here. Her daughter lived in Fort Lauderdale, and for a time her daughter worked for Artic. And on her passing, her daughter donated pieces of her personal collection to the African American Research Library's archive. Miss Hewitt is still with us, but she and her husband also donated really important artwork to the African American Research Library. And so Ms. Hewitt and her husband are very known for the work that they've done in terms of collecting art in the diaspora, and have amassed a collection of art that is pretty much world renowned. But the work that we've been able to do around highlighting this particular collection speaks to how we try to curate our exhibits from our collection. And it is our nod to looking at librarians, Black librarians, and how they're not only librarians, but they're also collectors in their own right. So being able to see some of the things that they thought were important that they wanted to keep in their own personal collections. And so I don't know if you'll ever get down here. We're probably going to try to do a virtual kind of walkthrough of the exhibit, but I do think that this is an exhibit that you don't want to miss if you have the opportunity to see it. So I don't know if it was anyone on there locally besides some of my staff that have shown up, but I think they enjoy it too. And so we have some things in this collection that gives a nod to Dorothy and her time at Howard University and building the Moreland Spingarn collection. Also the work of Vivian Hewitt and her being the first Black librarian hired in Pittsburgh under one of the Carnegie libraries. But it's a really wonderful experience in how their art collecting and just collecting of ephemera and things like that kind of speak to each other, because both of them were very much interested in the Black diaspora. And so another exhibit that speaks to sort of like the everyday person is The Porch is a Tree is the Watering Hole, which was an exhibit that actually focused on the people of the Sistrunk community. It's a really beautiful exhibit. If you walk through it, you would actually see people in the photography and things like that that you knew. But this is one of the things, so these were co-curated exhibits. And one of the things that's important for us is that we go in and try to supplement exhibits with pieces from our collection to add additional kind of understanding and connecting whatever it is that they're wanting to talk about to our collection. And so we were able to do that with the Porch is the Tree, through some of our artifactual kind of content and some of our books that are in our archives. But this was a really, like I said, an important exhibit because it showed everyday people in the community. And so the title was this idea that there is a connection in the diaspora, whether it is the porch, whether it is the tree, whether it's the watering hole, I could go further, whether it's the bodega, wherever, that Black people show up in community and gather in different places. And it's similar wherever you are in the world. And so this was those kind of diasporic connections that this exhibit was making, and it was quite successful. It was put on by the Broward Cultural Division last year. And so our other recent exhibit in our museum space that I want to share with you about is was a partnership with a group called Partners in Racial Justice. Confederate currency is sort of not a new exhibit, but I think we were able to bring some fresh perspective to it, particularly looking at this idea we're focusing on the everyday person. So the work that John Jones did with his artwork and teasing out those images that were featured on Confederate currency of enslaved people, how we, pretty much the hypocrisy of wealth in this country and the labor that that the Confederacy was banking on, no pun intended, how those folks show up on the very currency that they're willing to die and fight to be able to hold people in permanent servitude for all of their life. And so thinking about how these folks show up on this currency and connecting that also back to, it was images depicting currency from Florida as well. So making those sort of connections to our community and helping them to understand where we're at in this country in terms of wealth and how it was built. And so those were some of the things that in our exhibit space that I think that were important as we think about documenting local folks and also just regular people from the past. And so I realized when I was putting this together that my talk is very art-centric, but it's art-centric, but I will say that I have been blessed to be able to do work within a space that doesn't confine me to just books, and that I'm able to work in a way that meets folks at their different kinds of educational and literacy needs and things like that. So we might not always get people to come upstairs and check out books, but the way that our Arts and Cultural Center works is that we believe that it is a pipeline to a way in which we bring folks in to do the more serious kind of research. And so with that said, some of my work, I've been pursuing this mission of idea of libraries as an art incubator for underrepresented artists. And I just want to say that this is not anything that is new, but I'm simply trying to follow in the footsteps or in the model of other really wonderful Black librarians who are associated with important movements in our nation around Blackness, from Harlem Renaissance to Black arts movement. For me, in this contemporary moment of Black Lives Matter and Me Too and all of those other movements, social justice movements, I believe it is my duty as a librarian and as an administrator to be within those mix, and how do we use our libraries to advance those kinds of conversations. So I have been able, thankfully, to create programs that create opportunities for local artists while with the intent to elevate our collections through its use by the artists, but also to inspire them to create original artwork and content that can then be brought into the archive and represent their work as local folks. And so in 2020, we were awarded some funds that allowed us to commission an original play about the actress Esther Rolle. As I mentioned earlier, her collection is within our archive, and we wanted to figure out a way to breathe new life into the archival collection, but also bring the story of Esther Rolle to a new audience. I mean, the show, she's best known for her work on the show Good Times, but having sat in the archive and looking through her stuff, she's dynamic in a way that the show Good Times flattened her. But she's dynamic in a way that the show Good Times actually creates a trajectory for how we see Black families on television sitcoms. And so what we were able to do, like I said, is to commission original play where playwrights came in and they spent time doing sort of like historical research and writing using the archive. And then they collaborated to create a wonderful play based on her life. And we were able to do all of this during the pandemic. We were stumped for a while trying to figure out how do we use our theater space safely. And so we got together and we figured out this is the opportunity for us to create community and create a gathering that is safe by doing a production on an outside theater stage and allowing people to experience a drive-in kind of live theater performance. And so what you see at the top is an image of a night that they're closing of the cast of the Esther Rolle play. And so it was really rewarding because what we were able to do using those grant funds is not only mount an entire production, but we were able to pay the writers for their work, pay the actors for their work, and all these folks are local people. And if you remember, we're still in a pandemic, but if you remember, like at that time, 2020, 2021, the arts community was suffering greatly because there was no place for them to be able to exhibit their art in a way in which they could actually get funding, get paid for their work. So folks were on, online or doing whatever they just to be able to express themselves. So it was really a wonderful opportunity to see all of those things come together. And so I want to be in the lineage and of the librarians of the Harlem Renaissance that helped the new Negro movement be what it was, and how we're still feeding off of that even to this day. And so that work will continue to live on because this March we're bringing that back. We had an overwhelming community response about how excited they were to have experienced this, and so we're going to bring it back. It's now being reimagined and it's been rewritten, and the play is called Head Above Water. That is a sort of nod to the song of Good Times, but it is going to be a wonderful, once again, outside event for people to enjoy and understand who Esther Rolle was and all that she actually was able to do, and her stance on with the producers of the Good Times to say that she wanted a traditional family represented and she wanted a husband. And like I said, that is the sort of legacy that allows for any Black sitcom that you've seen on television that has a sort of traditional nuclear family. And so also, in my bio, Sierra mentioned the Art and Activism Social Justice Art Residency. Last year, we were successful in getting another grant to support an artist residency. This is our first time doing a sort of artist residency. This artist residency is based in art that speaks to social justice issues within our particular contemporary moment. And so we selected 5 Black and Brown local artists to use their art to speak to whatever social justice issue they want to speak to. So some are doing ideas of displacement, some are taking oral histories and turning those into sort of musical movements. There is a photographer, there is a muralist. And so how that will culminate is a festival at the end of April where all of their work will debut. And so one of the things that was important to me when this grant was written, since it was about social justice, was that I made sure that economic justice was built into the fabric of the grant that I wrote, in the sense that the monies that were received, over 90% of those funds were directed directly to the artist. So there's only a very little bit that was left for our use, but most of this money during this time, most of the money for this grant goes directly to the artist. And so I did that once again, because I understood how important going through a pandemic and being isolated, how important the arts were for me in terms of consuming, giving me a little bit of sanity, and thinking about like folks that have to have that sort of creative outlet, or they don't know what to do with themselves. How do we support that kind of local work to tell these folks that we value what they bring to the community? And we all know when you value something, you will pay for it. And so we were able to actually get the grant and pay them a nice stipend for their work on this particular residency. And so the last thing I want to mention about this is that in the middle, you see this Indaba art conversation. So I was able to host a talk with the curator, Tammy Lawson from Schomburg Center, and one of our art and activism residents for a panel at Miami's Art Basel, looking at libraries as art incubators. And it was really a rewarding conversation, because I was able at the end of that to have a conversation with the wonderful fiber artist, Bisa Butler, and her magnificent work. And in that conversation, it was almost like an aha moment for her, because telling her about the panel that we conducted or held, she said, this actually, libraries were the spaces when I first started out that gave me the opportunity to exhibit my work. And so what I would encourage you all to do is to find and support your local artists. You have local Bisa Butlers out there, and figuring out how to give them space within your library. I think that when hearing her, it affirmed the work that I've been trying to do. And I want to continue to do that kind of work with supporting local artists. Still talking about art. And so I want to say thanks to Ashley Bryan. He recently transitioned on February 4th. But he was seminal, as well as Dr. Henrietta Smith, in establishing the Ashley Bryan Art Series at the African-American Research Library and Cultural Center. And both of these folks left an actual legacy here at the African-American Research Library through this collaborative project that they dreamed up together when Artic first opened. So Dr. Henrietta Smith is a renowned educator, also a champion of diverse literature for children, as well as Ashley Bryan, who was creating images of children of the diaspora in his work long before a lot of other folks were publishing this kind of content. And he's here featured, smiling very brightly with our youth services supervisor, Lisa Jackson, very early on in the Ashley Bryan series. But for us thinking about the children, we're trying to figure out different pathways to literacy and different kinds of literacy. And so what I'm sharing with you all today is some of the highlights, but we also still struggle with some of the things that are there in the community, which is we don't have a very high circulation rate, because when we're still trying to figure out how to manage that, right? But we're trying to create programs that speak directly to our children that we serve, and how we can help them see themselves. And maybe if they see themselves more, then they might be more likely to check out that book and things like that. And so the work of Dr. Smith and Ashley Bryan was that they wanted to create a diversity children's lit kind of conference and conversation engagement at the African-American Research Library. And so you see the plaque here. Dr. Smith donated about, I want to say about 12 pieces to the African-American Research Library of Ashley Bryan. So this image that you see is one of the images that is in our Ashley Bryan gallery on the second floor that leads you into the youth services section. But this has started a sort of event that happens that is so rewarding, and that we celebrate illustrators and authors of African descent. They could be honor winners, they could be actual winners of awards like CSK, but we bring those folks into the community from wherever they are in the world to our community, and we let the children of the community as well as the educators see a person of African descent who is either wrote and illustrated a book, or they are the illustrator, because one of the things that we want to do is to aid in educating and inspiring art appreciation and literacy by hosting them here. And one of the really great takeaways of their always enthusiastic yes to participate in our Ashley Bryan series is that they leave behind an original piece of their artwork as a part of their contribution or donation to the African American Research Library. So when children are in our youth services section, they see original artwork by authors like Kadir Nelson, Javaka Steptoe, Floyd Cooper, all these things of original art that surrounds them when they come in and play on the computers or do whatever else that they do. They see themselves reflected, not just reflected, but reflected with actual real art. And so that's one of the things that we find very important here at Artic, is that we have Miami, which is very close, but a lot of these children will never possibly leave their neighborhood. And so the access to Miami, which is not far, which is a heavy arts scene, but they might not be quite as welcome in those spaces. So we create opportunities to engage with real art in this space all the time. So it is not anything that is new to them. And so the exhibit space, they want to come see it, they can go into the exhibit space. And so the idea of being in a museum is familiar to them. It is not out of the ordinary. And so those are the ways that we work to address some of those gaps and disparities. And so we're very proud to say that Lisa Jackson, featured in this picture, was able to secure a ALA Whitney Carnegie grant to create the Ashley Bryan project, a resource guide. And it features all of the content of our past Ashley Bryan speakers. It includes digital photos of their art. It includes all kinds of really resourceful information for folks who want to understand and learn more about diverse literature, and also just the work of the Ashley Bryan art series here at Artic. And one thing that's important about that also is that we were able to solicit Dr. Cook last year to write a really smart piece for that particular project. So if you go to that project, you'll see a essay by Dr. Cook on diverse children literature. So I encourage you to check that out. And I'm going to wrap up with a couple other things, thinking about switching from art. You're probably tired of hearing me talk about art, but switching from art to thinking about innovative technology. And so just like we want to create art engagement in our community, we're also pushing ideas about how to create innovative engagement with collections and how we think about storytelling. And so one of those projects is Virtual Artic, and the other is our new program around holograms. And so our project, Virtual Artic, is a project of 3D models of artifacts in our special collections. And they include African masks and carvings and figurines and other unique and significant artifacts that are in our collection. And so Virtual Artic does something interesting in that it is a project that is designed to expand access to the library's unique special collections through the utilization of 3D dimensional modeling and augmented reality. And so the project features about 20 artifacts of African figures and statues in our special collections. And each artifact has been 3D scanned to produce a sort of virtual model, and it's accessible through the Virtual Artic website. And so for us, the intent was to project, for the project is to provide a means for experiencing a display of special artifacts in a way that you might not be able to otherwise access it. So you might not be able to come here, but you could go to this site and experience a 360 kind of viewing of some of the pieces that are in our collection that have been 3D scanned. And so this project was in collaboration with Dr. Bryan Carter out of the University of Arizona and his really fascinating digital humanities lab. We also were able to work with him a couple years back on this idea of virtual Harlem, where we created and worked together to create a sort of virtual reality Harlem experience. We received an IMLS grant. We toured that throughout the state of Florida. So different cultural heritage organizations focused on Black culture and identity signed up. And so we were able to host that there, taking the exhibit and the 3D goggles, Oculus, those things, and folks were able to experience virtual reality Harlem setting, Harlem Renaissance setting. And so continuing, so this is our third project with him. This is the holograms. And so we're trying to think about how to engage folks around storytelling in a way that is experiential. So if you scan this QR code, you're going to get someone pop up on your screen and they're going to tell you a lot of stuff. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I encourage you to just check it out. This is something that we're sort of exploring. We debuted it last week, but we plan to use it as a way to tell the story of Black history that is in the palm of folks' hands. Everyone has a cell phone pretty much, but this is a way where someone will show up where you're at and tell you a brief narrative about who they were and what they did in this particular part of Broward County. And so it's been fun to hear folks' experience with this, but the sort of the genesis of the hologram is that back in 2010, the library has unveiled a robotic of Sam Morrison. So if you ever come to visit, or you may have seen the article years ago where, just like Madame Tussauds, they did a wax cast of Samuel Morrison. And when you go into our museum space, he's sitting there. Sometimes he freaks people out because he looks so human. And it's motion detected, and he tells you the story of Artic. So we've always tried to incorporate technology and making it accessible. We understand that there are issues with the digital divide, but really trying to bring innovative technology to our community to say that they are worth the investment and they should be able to be a part of some of this groundbreaking technology. And so I want to sort of wrap up with the last part of my talk, which is talking about archiving the Black web. This, in a lot of ways, is also a nod to everyday people. It was co-created by myself and partner Burgess Jules of Shift Collective. And so archiving the Black web is our attempt to address issues in support and establishing a more equitable kind of access to a web archiving practice to better help people who are working in Black memory and Black knowledge institutions to be able to document the folks of their community. So I always like to liken this to thinking about web archiving as the work of the modern kind of clipping files. Clipping files have been important to the practice of librarianship, particularly important to the practice of documenting Black people. And so if we think about the web as a space where Black people are creating digital content, the next phase of archives has to be able to grapple with this. The issue becomes that folks who are focused on, whose mission focused on documenting the Black experience, a lot of times our institutions are under-resourced. So in a lot of ways, web archiving is a luxury. And so if we're just trying to get through the backlog of just regular analog material, like how do we find the space and time to do the kind of work that requires with a web archive? And so in the spirit of for us, by us, or the African proverb of we can do this. If we want to go alone, you go. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So we're hoping to try to go together to a place that will allow us to just collectively try to document just a piece of some of the content that is being produced in the web space. So for future researchers, they understand, like, well, what happened during this pandemic within the Black community, or what exactly is Black Twitter? What are all these things, how Black folks are driving content online? How do we figure out a way just to take a very small piece of that and give at least the future a glimpse of what is possible? Because no, nothing is forever in the digital space. And so if we're trying to kind of replicate that experience that they would have present day 20 years later, we have to figure out the resources and build the skills necessary to start that kind of web archiving project. And so we've been successful. Some of you who are here today, thank you for attending our very successful forum that happened last year in April. It was overwhelming. We didn't realize we would receive so much of a response, but it was very fulfilling to be able to bring that to the community. And actually, the silver lining of not being able to meet in person is that we created access to folks that probably would not have been invited to the actual in-person meeting had that been able to happen. And so we are about to start closing out this project. We have our last forum, which we're going to, fingers crossed, actually host in person. But the work of this project is to really think about how to balance out the inequities in web archiving with the focus on increasing Black web archive collections. And like I said, closing that kind of knowledge and skill gaps. And so Burgess and I have been very excited about the work that we've been able to do with archiving the Black web and just the overall interest and support that we've been able to get. And so that is the sort of technological kind of work that I'm trying to work to, thinking about how does locally the Black community show up in the digital space, and where is our responsibility of being able to just archive some of that. And so with that, I am going to close out and open it up for questions.
This was great. One question was shared in the chat, and I do want to share it because we have about like 2 minutes left in our time. But this was amazing, amazing. So someone asked earlier, will there be anything in relation to the JCLC conference in Florida this fall? So will you be doing
that is in across the state on the Gulf side. So it's not that far. I do intend to send some of my librarians. I haven't, I think they just put the call out, but it probably would be worth us participating in some capacity with JCLC. I have been fortunate to be able to have attended the past 2 JCLCs. I think it's 2, 3, anyhow. I don't want to break my streak. So Artic will be there and show up in some capacity.
Awesome. Yeah, people are in the comments, and I see Lisa saying working on it. Tawana put the deadline, and then I did scan the QR code, so make sure you scan it. I'm going to try to get the QR code from you so we can share it when I send out the recording as well.
Jonathan said, did I scare you, Jonathan? Scanning the QR code was a fun surprise.
Yes, don't spoil it. Don't spoil it. Okay, well, we are at time. I would love for you to drop your social media links in the chat as well, and then I'll share them. This was amazing. Dr. Cook, did you have any final words?
No, I just want to thank Makiba personally. We've known each other for a long time, and I've always been a great fan of her work, and I'm just grateful that you could come through today.
Thank you so much. And by the way, let me just put this plug in. Dr. Cook is coming to see us in April.
I am.
We're gonna do a wonderful event called Black Women Librarian Leadership. And she is, I'm like I said, I'm honored to be a part of this because Dr. Cook is amazing. And so she is going to be on a historic panel. I'm calling it historic because she will be in conversation with her other sister librarians. So Tracy Hall, we have Dr. Sophia Noble, we have Dr. Meredith Evans, and of course, Dr. Cook. And so we're all going to be in conversation around the work that these women have been doing and the legacy, like I said, that they are in changing librarianship to make it better, not only for Black folks, but for everyone. So we're working to also live stream that, but it will be here in our theater space. And one of my beloved staff members, Belva Jordan, I think she's somewhere in the room, she's calling this the Super Bowl of librarians. So y'all just get ready, because she is a designer extraordinaire, so I'm not sure what she's gonna pull out.
Okay, so people are asking if it's gonna be recorded and you're gonna do the live stream. All right, well, that is our time for today. Thank you so much for sharing all your insight. It was really inspiring. I want to encourage everyone to check out the next Augusta Baker Diversity Lecture and stay connected. Let's keep these conversations going. Connect with everyone online, with Dr. Cook online, so you can see all the amazing things she's doing, and then also connect with Ms. Foster so you can see all the amazing things she's doing. Thank you all for your time today. We truly appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for the opportunity.